Hi, I'm Meta Spencer, and today is Thursday, May the 7th, which is the first Thursday in the month, and we have a conventional activity where we get together on the first Thursdays of every month to have conversations of all the members of Project Save the World. And now I see we have some people who are sort of newcomers here. Although Bill Reese, I've heard your name and I think we've even met. I think you're a sociologist too, aren't you?
I'm an ecologist.
Ecologist.
But yeah. So
okay.
I taught in a school of community and regional planning at UBC.
And we have some other people. Here comes Paul Werbos back. But I get to say hello to Jacobson because we had a very interesting conversation. And Robbie Tulip, who's there in Australia. All right, and Tom Hedberg, my goodness. Tom, you sent me a blurb, a poster or something announcing a very interesting colloquium in which you are going to participate or have participated. I want to introduce everybody to Jill Carr-Harris because Jill is going to be my successor in running Project Save the World, and she's already been overworked. Every move I make, I try to slough off my jobs onto her, make her do it instead of me these days, and she seems to have an endless openness to doing that. So everybody should get to know Jill. She's going to be your next fearless leader. So, because I have this on my mind about Tom, why don't you start off telling us a bit about what this meeting is?
Basically, what Meta's referring to is I'm the executive director of an NGO associated with the United Nations called the International Medical Crisis Response Alliance. And one of our primary foci during the past year or so has been misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda, which in association with artificial intelligence is standing fair to regress civilization substantially in a number of different areas. What we've done is, because we had an invitation from the ECOSOC division at the UN to hold a side event in coordination with their Science, Technology, and Innovation Week, which is this week in New York, on specifically this area. And just to shorten it, we call it MDP, Misinformation, Disinformation, and Propaganda. What we've done is collect specialists in this area from all over the world. We have, for example, Joyita Gupta from India, who is a member of the Council of 10, most renowned scientists worldwide. We have Dr. Kunduri, Dr. Miller, a prominent internist. We have Dr. Sloan, Mr. Delafrey, and basically a number of panelists who will be speaking to the issue of misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda, specifically as it impacts the dissemination of accurate scientific, medical, and environmental matters worldwide. And the reason I feel so strongly about this is because this directly impacts everything we talk about here in Save the World, because in order to save the world, you've got to get everyone on your side, and or at least on somebody's side. And if they're on the side of the wrong people and they're supporting the wrong people, then they're basically destroying the world. So yes, you can make progress saving the world, but you have to have people going along with you. So essentially, that's it. I am now in the midst of working heavily on getting the last nuts and bolts in place for this colloquium. It will be this evening.
It's a really fascinating topic, just what constitutes misinformation. And so for example, I'm particularly interested at the moment. There's quite a big debate in Australia about anti-Semitism. and there's very conflicting views about what constitutes misinformation and disinformation in regard, for example, to Israel's actions in Gaza and Lebanon, and so it's one of the things that I find really interesting is the theme of reconciliation. That is how to bring people with completely differing worldviews into acceptance of each other and way of cooperating. And when people just start off with the view that everything that other person says is misinformation, so I'm not going to listen to them. I've been particularly interested in the theme of dialogue. That is how you can get people with very different viewpoints.
It's an interesting point. I'm a classically trained scientist. I'm a neurophysiologist, and so the core of my approach to everything is pure objectivity. And again, you're trained to be as objective as possible as a scientist. Now, when it comes to what you're talking about, polarization in points of view and different worldviews, again, the approach is that is not necessary, because in the end, all we rely upon is the data. If the data is accurate, if the information is accurate, then the polarization tends to diminish. That's the more critical. I think that's probably the best way I can phrase our approach, is that let's get the accurate information out. In other words, if you go around saying that, for example, Tylenol causes autism on the basis of nothing, or on the basis of some lunatic that the chief maggot happened to hire for the United States to run the Department of Health, it's very easy to disprove. That's the issue. Because if you look at it objectively, you can say, here's the data, this is what it shows, this is accurate data, this is how long it's been collected, this is the other side of the coin, this is why the other side of the coin is not convincing, or is not something that you should pay attention to. But basically a balanced, objective look at the issue that's brought up. And if you have, and again, this is a little bit of a division here, if you have reasonable people who are open to the idea of objectivity, then the polarization diminishes. The problem is, right now, we've gotten to the stage where we no longer have reasonable people. We've got people who are so heavily brainwashed by only one point of view that they eschew objectivity. Oh, we're not interested in that. There's only one reality, and that only comes from one source, and that's all we want to hear. And that's the issue that I think Meta referred to DTTC at some point. That's one of our programs. We're trying to reach that very large segment of the population, that only wants to believe one thing from one source and has no interest in objectivity whatsoever.
It's incredible, isn't it? Because, so you've got 40% of Americans who support young Earth creationism. That's a steady result out of Gallup polls. And that sort of poisons people's minds against objectivity, because they've convinced themselves of something that's not objective. The case, I'm particularly interested in climate science and how to reach out to conservative people in a constructive way. But I read The Australian, which is a conservative newspaper, Murdoch newspaper in Australia. And in the comments section last week, an article on climate change, I always look at what are the most popular comments. And the most popular comment, hundreds of likes, on an article I read recently, was the CO2 level is going down, and in fact that's a good thing. It's great that we've got 430 parts per million of CO2, but it's going down, and that received more likes than anything else. So there's this emotional comfort that people get in disinformation that just inoculates them against objectivity.
Oh, you're absolutely correct. One of the things we do is we're constantly monitoring social media. And we find that there are certain themes in social media that people particularly react to, and that's what we're playing up to. The themes are, I just sketch a few off the top of my head. You have to identify an enemy and demonize that enemy. And these are techniques that have been used. Matter of fact, we did an article for Meta. I think it was Meta, wasn't it, last year in Peace Magazine on the whole issue of MDP? You use various techniques that have been used since the time of Goebbels in the 1930s to basically completely, and you used a good term, inoculate people against reality. And one of them is you demonize a certain enemy. It used to be the Jews. Now it still is, yeah. Or it's the liberals or the Dems, or you pick out a name for this group, then you demonize them, then you isolate them. They are no longer part of your milieu, and you basically foster tribalism in one way or another to distance yourself from these people. That gives a tremendous emotional boost to lots of people, because now they have an enemy to blame all of their woes on or all of their concerns with, even if those concerns are manufactured. And I agree with you completely, because what happens is you get somebody putting in, look at Nancy Pelosi, she is a witch, isn't she awful? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not hundreds, of stupid one-line comments. Yeah, kill her. Yeah, expel her, throw her out of the country. Yeah, how awful. How can we do that? We need more Americans. They don't even know what they're talking about. They have no information, but it's the idea of, it's like from Monty Python. She's a witch. She's a witch. Burn her. People just love to do this. They love to have an enemy that they can excoriate one way or another. And that feeds it. And the people who are the political strategists behind the maggots, they know that. And they've just been exploiting it like mad, successfully. One of the issues, or other issues that we deal with, is the opposition is so ridiculously clueless in trying to offset this. It's absurd. It's almost like we've had this one analogy, and forgive me, Meta, that I'll shut up after this, but the opposition is very concerned with ethics, and they're very concerned with procedure. And we've seen this with the Democrats and with various liberal groups and so on and so forth. Well, how shall we approach this issue without being too radical? How shall we? And it's like, the barbarians are at the gate with heads on spikes, and they're worrying about how to arrange the dishes for the reception for the barbarians. And we need to take a different.
Yet, Thomas, there's also an opposite form of demonization. Like you're describing the sort of populist demonization of progressive thinking. But then there's also a very big community that demonizes Donald Trump, for example, and demonizes everything that's conservative, because it's like it's creating this polarization.
Oh, yeah.
Society.
And Robbie, I'd be cautious about one term, conservative. These people are not conservatives, okay?
Sure.
Yeah, and they use that all the time. It makes it sound good. They are not conservative. Conservative is a very different, and we got to get rid of using that phrase. These people are fully indoctrinated maggots.
Radicals.
Yeah, for one thing or another. And I agree with you completely. We have a lot of far left individuals who it's like, please don't be on my side. Do not be on my side, because you are saying stupidity. You are not helping the cause, and you're exactly right. They are attacking Trump, this in very silly, ineffective ways. So it's a difficult path to walk. You want to establish objectivity as something that is absolutely necessary in order to continue to build civilization as we know it. But you really don't need people on our side or on the side saying that they're on the side of objectivity and progress, using techniques that are just, forget it, that they can just feed into, and they can just use as fuel.
I think Bill Reese has been probably in this game longer than the rest of us and experiencing the same kind of polarization and vilification of opponents. And he's probably been the butt of a lot. But and so I'd like his thoughts. But mostly, to me, the question that you keep posing is this is all because we have this proclivity for wanting an enemy, and we feel more fulfilled, or that we're living the good life if we are in a struggle against idiots. And I don't know what in the world to do about that. I look for solutions.
We've got a lot of polarization because a lot of activists have decided to demonize the fossil fuel industry. And the result is that we're not actually getting rational thought. The fossil fuel industry is blamed for CO2 when in fact it's as much the consumers as the producers who are as much to blame for increase in CO2 and greenhouse gases. And because of this fight, the fact that the planet's albedo has been going up, regardless of
going down.
CO2 going down, regardless of CO2, has been completely ignored by the blind followers who say that the fossil fuel industry are the demons. And we must do everything we can to attack them. And the real requirement to increase the planet's albedo has been overlooked. And the followers of this kind of anti-fossil fuel tribe think that anything like cooling the planet with SO2 in the stratosphere is completely ludicrous and out of the question and irrelevant to their cause, which is to kind of chastise the fossil fuel companies as much as they can.
I'm just wondering, all this demonization that goes on through social media, how much of it, if any, is driven by algorithms? I'm led to believe that there's more of that kind of thing going on than actual people perpetrating these messages. And then, is that true or not?
But yeah, AI is playing a major role in what's going on here. And in fact, a lot of these mails that are going out are clearly written by AI.
Even the people speaking are artifices
Yeah.
in many cases. I follow a number of channels that people are subscribing to, believing it's real, and it's all manufactured nonsense. So it's a huge problem. I think Thomas is absolutely correct that we're going off the rails because we no longer have any sense of common interest as long as the AI industry and the whole of social media are creating increasing divisions in society. It's becoming fragmented and disengaged from any common interests. So,
well, can anybody explain to me, because you and I are seeing, I think, the same stuff on YouTube. I watched something by, oh golly, who's that guy at Stanford who's a father of string theory, a famous physicist. Doesn't matter. Main thing is they had this guy in a library, and he looked great. He looked about 20 years younger than I think he really looks nowadays. And he was speaking with no notes. The most impressive, beautifully written analysis of humming, actually, how if everybody would hum. Tom Hedberg, you can tell me whether there's anything to this humming notion. Going to do something to my vagus nerve or something. But at any rate, I was very convinced because this man went on for an hour And then after I signed up and I even sent it to somebody to look at, a friend, then I realized it's all fake. Now, can this guy, Susskind, Leonard Susskind, that's what it is, could he sue the people making this up, or can we assume that in fact he probably authorized them, or they wouldn't have done it? How can they get away with making this look completely convincing when I'm sure it was all a machine, even faking his voice and his body, and even the background, this library that it was in. What do you do?
You have to talk to the lawyers about that. There's a number of test cases already out right now regarding actors that they've completely reconstructed for various movies, and their families are now protesting. But again, it's all with the lawyers. It might be better to just go ahead, do it, make the money, and then we'll deal with the lawyers later. Yeah. Anyway, listen, folks, I have got to get back to preparations for tonight. I put the link in the chat. So if you can recover it from the chat.
Can people watch it later?
Yeah, there's the live link in there.
All right.
Take care, all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
How do we break into this and disrupt it and get the truth out? The planet is too hot. In particular, the poles are far too hot, and they're in meltdown, and all those tipping points are going to be breached sooner or later, and we're in for a very, very unpleasant future if we don't do some cooling very quickly. How do we break
if I could comment on that, John. As Meta mentioned before you came on, she and Elliot and I had a really good conversation on ethical issues related on Project Save the World, and one of the themes that I find really interesting is whether human psychology is so inherently degraded and depraved that we're on a trajectory towards collapse and extinction that can't be reversed. And my view is that it can be reversed, but that it's very challenging. And I think that this point that our last, what was his name, the speaker who's just left,
Thomas.
Thomas. The point that he was making about objectivity, I think, is absolutely crucial, because it raises the ethical status of science. Just that logic and evidence are just core moral principles, and that if you seek to ground your worldview in scientific method and logic and evidence, then it's a way to overcome the instinct of tribalism. But the problem being that tribalism is just so inherent in our genetic constitution, and so you get something like, for example, Greta Thunberg. She says follow the science, but then she says, in order to follow the science, we must build a tribal movement that seeks to destroy the fossil fuel industry. And it's really not a very scientific argument, unfortunately. But there's this mobilization of science in the interests of a tribal instinctive belonging that gives emotional comfort. And so the question that you and I are asking, John, is how can a scientific ethic be mobilized to generate public understanding of strategies that will actually work, a theory of change that can actually achieve a transition to a stable climate. So that's just a contribution from me, and I'll hand back.
We've got a responsibility to respond to the facts and either produce evidence that our facts are wrong or actually do something about it. So Robbie and I and others have letters saying that the policy's got to take account of the terrible things that are in store for us if we don't apply some cooling technology, basically.
It's still just a drop in the bucket in the face of mythological thinking that dominates our society.
Rose.
I'm really having difficulty understanding the difference between demonizing the fossil fuel industry and accurately reflecting what the science says. And I'm under the impression that one of the first things that has to be done to try to salvage a sustainable future is to get away from the use of fossil fuels. And they have been enormously successful over the years in covering their tracks and or the dangers they pose and so on. So that's one thing. And also when it comes to human behavior, we are programmed genetically to respond to violence or love or whatnot, our emotions, according to psychology I was taught in my youth. And this is what the tech companies capitalize on for profit-driven purposes. So if we want to try to reduce some of these influences based on our human genetic makeup, we have to I think expect more of the tech companies and how they design their platforms. They're designed for profit, and violence is a very quick attention getter.
The problem with that, though, Rose, is that if we say, okay, we're going to solve climate change by demonizing the fossil fuel industry and stopping using fossil fuels, then it's just deeply impractical. Fossil fuels have such, as John mentioned, there is such high demand for fossil fuels that the demand and the supply are equally guilty of polluting the world and causing global warming. So the prospect and so what the United Nations IPCC have said is that we need a fundamental transformation of every sector of the economy.
I agree.
And when you make that argument, it just isolates you into a very oppositional viewpoint. Whereas I would suggest that what is needed is to find ways to work cooperatively with the existing economy to find some sort of reconciliation that can achieve a glide path, a soft landing out of our current situation. And this is where John's work on cooling the Arctic is really vital. Just, if we can get a broader consensus that's allowing the Arctic to melt is quite dangerous in security terms. We're already getting the Nordics and especially Iceland. Countries are saying, yeah, that's right. The stopping of the currents of the Atlantic Ocean is a genuine security threat. But those the idea that we will prevent the AMOC collapsing, for example, by cutting our emissions, it's just not true. Cutting emissions, it's just too small and too slow to have any impact. It's only the sort of technological interventions. So I'm really interested in building the constituencies of support for practical evidence-based solutions. Meta and I had a great conversation with Sandy Trust from the UK Institute of Actuaries, and about how the insurance industry could possibly have an interest in evidence-based solutions. And the interesting thing is that even though the climate damage for the insurance industry is doubling every decade, like $100 billion a year in payouts, they don't care because they're super profitable. And but but there's a bunch of associated people like the actuaries. Actuaries are actually interested in objectivity as a principle, and so there's the potential for us to work with to identify regulatory bodies and others who have a genuine interest in facts. And
Yeah, well, yeah, of course, facts should be more helpful and persuasive than they are. I think a day or two ago on CBC Radio here in Canada, there was a news clip about homeowners in flood-prone zones resenting having their the flood areas being appropriately mapped because the implication would be that their properties were worth much less money. In other words, rather than safety and responding to the signs and what it anticipates is going to happen to their homes, they don't want their property values to sink. So there's adults don't learn well, unfortunately, according to adult learning theory and practice. They tend to learn best in a crisis, and in a democratic forms of governance, unfortunately, having to please all the people and stay elected means that over the years, over the decades, really, we've had 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. Certainly, this is to be observed, I think, in Canada. We had a carbon tax. Well, in order to please one part of the country and stay in retaining some sort of political power, that was eliminated, and soon other parts of the country wanted the same thing. So I just don't know how we do this in a way that is going to retain our democratic forms of governance and still have people respond reasonably to facts.
I'd like to go back to the point that I was actually trying to raise earlier. I think it was Robbie who was, no, who was it? I don't know, somebody was, oh, it's Tom Hedberg who was talking about how everybody gets so much pleasure and satisfaction out of being part of a tribe and having an enemy and hating the other side and feeling virtuous because your tribe is right. I think it's more like supporting your particular your local football team or your baseball team. There's this sense of having pleasure in identifying with a group, even if it's something as silly as whether you favor the Yankees or the whatever. And I think that he was implying that this is sort of part of the human condition, that our minds are so so constituted that we get pleasure out of the most perverse kinds of things. And if that's true, and I think one has to take it seriously, what do you do about it? What in the world? I think that the worst job in the world is to be a therapist, because I think it's almost impossible to change another human being. And even for me to straighten my own head out is impossible, but straighten anybody else out is hopeless. And if I've got to think of changing the whole society and our craziness, that's really hard. I can easily find solutions to nuclear weapons, or whether geoengineering is basically good or bad. I can give you good answers, but I can't fix your head or a whole society. Maybe a culture, maybe if we had control over the TV series, the long dramas where you fall in love with a character in say the West Wing or something, and you follow them for 10 years, then you can influence people that way. But I don't know what fraction of society. Anyway, tell me, how do we cure human beings?
Okay,
one
Meta,
of the real
well, may I just quickly interject? Meta, you know that I have been working on cultural issues involving entertainment media and how this fuels certain kinds of behavior in real life prone to violence and hostility. We could, with a little more attention to the kind of popular culture we socialize our children into from a very early age, try to make the perverse sides of human nature a little less prominent. Anyway.
one of the really interesting ways to consider this matter is the role of religion as a way of promoting social cohesion, and interesting themes within Christianity that actually contest this sort of instinctive tribal comfort, belonging mentality.
As a matter of fact, I'm thinking of becoming a Catholic. The Pope is doing his job.
So like there are a few ideas in the Gospels, like love your enemies. It's a very countercultural, counterintuitive proposal. Yet it's something quite central. Like to love your enemies means to have respect, engage in courteous dialogue with people who you disagree and dislike, and it's very challenging. And then the classic argument between Jesus and Pontius Pilate, where Jesus said he's come into the world to bear witness to the truth, and Pilate's response was, "What is truth?" That's it's just a classic argument that and to bear witness. Actually, the word is to be a martyr, and so the idea that people who are standing up for truth and objectivity and facts and evidence and logic face the same sort of path that Jesus Christ faced to the cross. That they face persecution and marginalization. Yeah, so there is this, I suppose, recognition of the difficulty of getting a hearing for ethical arguments.
Well, okay, look, Robbie, I don't want to disagree with you, and I'm not sure that I do in the cases that you have cited, but you can't really claim that most religions are doing a great deal of healing interreligious community, of solidarity, because certainly most religions are more creating more hate than they do loving each other.
That's right. They don't follow the principles out of their text.
The religious beliefs, or is it the distortion of them?
Doesn't matter either way. You've got this thing going on. I don't know. I should shut up. Be quiet, Meta.
Meta, when you say you'd like to join the Catholic faith, getting back to popular culture, there's been some indication that a lot of young people are, if they're gravitating toward Christianity, for example, it tends to be the more traditional forms, like the Catholic, and in particular the Greek Catholic. And it's been suggested by at least one cleric that tends to be because of the way they've grown up with popular culture and the Game of Thrones and various rituals that come into the horror films and whatnot.
Actually, I thank you, Rose, for challenging me, because I actually was lying. I'm not going to be a Catholic. I couldn't possibly. But I sure like what the Pope is saying. But on the other hand, I think if my religion were anything, the most recent formulation was something that MIT asked Grok, how did the universe come into existence? And are there other beings in the universe that are also intelligent? And it gave a much better answer than I had heard so far. So that's my current theological position about the source of meaning and the universe itself, and how many aliens are among us on Earth, if any. do not ask me to amplify. But it was science. It was real science at MIT, and they really asked Grok.
And what was the answer?
I don't. You look it up, you'll find out. Look on YouTube, and it's got a very interesting story to tell.
Okay.
Entirely different matters on my mind right now. I mean, I'm keeping track of this coming El Nino. I'm watching Arctic sea ice, sea surface temperatures, global temperatures. I am celebrating that NOAA just posted its greenhouse gas numbers. I just had this crushing feeling that we would never see another update on the Keeling curve, so I was overjoyed to see that. And so I've just been writing this article about methane that I'm going to be posting to my Substack shortly. So I think when I hear talk about religion, of course, I think on my show I kind of I'm a radical atheist. It's not even in my ballpark to consider what I term invisible friends, which is, not a polite way of putting it. I think it's interesting times, and I'm enjoying the conversation, though it's not overlapping a lot with exactly, what I'm focused on at the moment.
But Elliot, are they going to continue producing the Keeling curve? Because Trump has tried to shut it down.
I don't know. I mean, there's the Scripps folks down in San Diego who I think is actually, maybe Bill Reese could correct me, still is actually run by Keeling's son, managed by right now.
That's right.
Yeah, and so that data is slightly different than the Mauna Loa data. They do some different reanalysis on it that they come up with, microscopically different numbers. So, you change from one to the other, it's a little hard. But Trump is sort of doing the death by 1,000 cuts on NOAA. So it's no longer going into the mainstream, press that these things are being defunded. There's just gradually, there's fewer grants going out. There's less projects being renewed. There's, people are having to do things, as volunteers that they used to get paid for. And so I don't know.
I think what you're saying is absolutely on. So I think we can look forward to further cuts. But for now, that curve is still going up. So let's hope it stays. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the latest casualty was the so-called biomass data, the thickness and volume data from the Arctic. And, I still get the extent data, and I've gone to using the Japanese source, the JAXA, for that because it's more reliable, and I use the European for global temperatures because then I don't have to worry every morning about waking up and having my data source, cut off.
Elliot, would you mind giving us kind of a view of what the data are saying? Because I frankly don't follow that, and I have no idea what we are to conclude on the basis of these reports.
I mean, there's so many different metrics that you can follow. For example, Arctic sea ice extent is currently at an all-time daily low. The prediction for El Nino is that it's now on track to, I don't know what the latest odds are, but let's call it a 50-50 chance of being the strongest El Nino since the great one of 1877 that caused, tens of millions of deaths due to starvation. So we have the El Nino ramping up. And because of that, we have an expectation that this year and certainly next may hit new record all-time global temperature peaks. CO2 just hit its record high with the latest data release. So it's now, I think, at 431 and change parts per million, on its way to 432 next month. So that'll be an all-time record high for CO2. Methane just peaked at its record high. I mean, it's pretty much everything you look at. Every metric is at its all-time record, and it's not clear at all how this is all going to play out, but this year and next are going to be wild and wicked years for the climate. We're going to see things we just never seen before.
The global warming rate, if it's continued as the current rate, we will hit 4 degrees centigrade before the end of the century. And now it's absolutely clear from that that we're in for a meter of sea level rise from ocean expansion alone. And it's also clear that the Arctic meltdown is not going to be stopped. And there are no figures from using CO2. Whatever we do with CO2, it's not going to stop the Arctic melting, even if we could eliminate emissions tomorrow, and perhaps even if we could remove quite a lot of CO2 from the atmosphere tomorrow, we still wouldn't be able to stop the melt, because the albedo of the planet has gone down too much. So it's absolutely plain, and you should make it plain on your Substack that
I do.
That unless we apply SRM, unless we apply technologies to cool the planet, we are toast.
Here comes Peter Wadhams. Well, that's wonderful. And just as we're talking about Arctic sea ice.
Well, I haven't said much because I've been trying to catch up with where you're thinking, but I'm a bit of an outlier here, because I admit absolutely that climate change is a horrific problem. Global heating, everything we've been discussing are horrific issues, but it's only a symptom of the real issue, which is ecological overshoot, which is itself caused by excessive industrialization on a finite planet. There are too many people consuming and polluting too much, full stop. And I'll back this up this way. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was, 1992? So that's 33 years ago now, 34 years ago. It was dedicated to starting the COP process, which was in turn dedicated to reducing atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations. Now, we've had 30-odd COP meetings, 6 or 7 treaties, a couple supposedly obligatory, but to no effect. My bottom line is this, that during the entire process of the focus on climate change, we've seen a 60% increase in emissions and the use of fossil fuels. And all of the numbers that Elliot mentioned are record-breaking, all of which have occurred during this 33 or 4 year period of human beings attempting to fix the climate. It's absolutely absurd. So the point I'm getting at is that the focus on climate as a symptom is like somebody dying of brain cancer has a headache and the physicians are applying aspirin, which addresses a little bit of the pain, but doesn't really address the problem, which is too many people consuming and polluting too much. That's what overshoot is all about. Human beings are using even renewable or self-producing resources on this planet, fisheries, soil, forests, whatever you want to talk about, much faster than they can regenerate. And we're dumping wastes much faster than the ecosphere can assimilate. Climate change is a waste management issue. Carbon dioxide is a driver of climate change. One of the anthropogenic drivers, and it's the single largest waste product by weight from industrial economies. People don't appreciate that, but that's the simple truth. We've simply failed completely to recognize that global systems have a finite capacity to assimilate and recycle the entropic detritus of human economic activity. So we're involved here in a process of addressing climate change, which has had the totally obtuse reverse effect of increasing climate change and making overshoot worse. Now, let me back that up. All of the acceptable approaches to fixing the climate include such things as wind towers and solar panels and EVs and carbon capture and storage, all of which represent billions of dollars of investment. They're sold to the public on grounds that they represent opportunities for economic growth and profit, so invest here, and so on and so forth. But of course, all of those technologies are constructed and maintained and facilitated using fossil fuel. So they've actually contributed to fossil fuel use. In fact, at most, the effect has been to reduce emissions from other sources by about 6%, but adding their own to the total. And in the meantime, as somebody has already mentioned, the fossil fuel use is increasing with the complete backing of the industries involved. Of course, they're in this for the profit. So what I'm getting at is that human beings, this goes back to several other things you've been talking about. Human beings have a habit of what is called in sociological terms, the social construction of reality. We have an innate, this is an inheritable quality of accepting or of assimilating our tribal myths simply by growing up within a particular culture. And it was highly adaptive in pre-industrial times, because if you could acquire the myths, values, assumptions, and behavioral norms of your tribe simply by being part of it, then that was a terrific advantage in providing you with a sense of personal identity as well as tribal cohesion. It gets worse than that, because we now know from neurocognitive science that repeated ideas, and this is how we acquire these tribal beliefs, repeated ideas literally help shape the synaptic circuits of the brain. And if you want a quick and dirty look at this, there's a wonderful little book by Bruce Wexler called Brain and Culture. And he simply points out that by growing up in a particular environment or milieu, one literally acquires inscribed in the brain circuitry that reflects those beliefs, values, and assumptions. By the way, education is dedicated to creating such circuits. So if you go to school these days in economics, for example, you're taught and acquire a profound belief in infinite growth, because we start from here's another human social construct. You're all familiar with exceptionalism, the notion that human beings are not part of nature. We're different from other species. We have a soul, and therefore we're not subject to natural law. Well, that's the starting point. It comes out of the Enlightenment for all of our modern techno-industrial society. So if you look at any modern economics textbook, the primary models, the circular flows models, don't make any reference to the environment. Why should they? The economy and the environment are separate entities. And the fundamental underpinning here is that human ingenuity is the only important resource. Human ingenuity, I'm just quoting textbooks, can find a substitute for any good or service provided by nature. So if you think that human beings are separate from nature, and you have an economy that is believed to be separate and independent of the natural environment, and you believe that human ingenuity creates resources. After all, coal and oil weren't resources until human brains set to work to figure out how to use them. Then you have the foundation for a belief in infinite growth. And that is where our whole industrial culture started from about 200 years ago. Mm-hmm. One thing nobody's mentioned here is if you go back just to 1850 and 1810, 1 billion people on Earth. Since then, we've had a 104-fold increase in real world product, a 1,000-fold increase in fossil fuel, because that's what made all of that possible, an 8-fold increase in population. So we've had about 7 or 8 generations of people out of thousands, during which we've had this enormous explosion of human exploitation of the ecosphere, all driven by fossil fuel. And we now take this to be the norm, okay? It's normal to expect a 3 to 4% per year growth in the economy. In fact, economists get very upset if it goes below 2%, which is still doubling in 35 years. So we have this completely abnormal period. The single most anomalous period in human history has been the last 200 years, and yet we accept it as our cultural norm. and everything is dedicated to perpetuating it. So that our approach to climate change has been to perpetuate the growth ethic by using what I call business as usual by alternative means. Okay, we don't need fossil fuel, but we'll invent various means of generating electricity, solar panels, wind towers, and so on and so forth, so we can maintain the current system ad infinitum. But the current system is killing us. And
William,
Thank
William,
you.
I don't think you've been listening to what I've said.
Yeah, look, I want to greet Peter Wadhams before I give the floor to John and then to Robbie, because Peter,
Hello, Peter. Hello, Peter.
Peter
Good to see
Wadhams is a dear friend. Usually he comes to everything I put on, and lately I think you've been unwell or something. But let me say hello to you first. How are you, dear?
Oh, I'm fine, thanks. Today I was having one of those chairs delivered that gives you mobility. So
Okay.
that was very important because I haven't been mobile recently.
Okay. You're like a wheelchair.
No, a chair that lifts and
Oh yes, I have one of those. Oh yes. Welcome to the club. Okay, I'll get back to you, but I think Robbie is next. No, we're John.
Well, John has put his hand down.
Next, and then Robbie. So I expect we're off on a different tangent now that we've got a bit.
I would like to continue where I was. I very much want to collaborate with Peter. I have sent an email to you, Peter, saying that we need to
yes,
really raise the stakes on this cooling and refreezing the Arctic.
yes. No, I'm keen on that, but it's taken me now after having a stroke. It takes me too long to write a reply. The time I've written a reply, it's another.
Yeah. So if I draft something, will you be able to read it and
Yes.
okay it?
Yes, happily, yeah.
Yeah. Because we made a submission to the Environment Audit Commission in 2012, if you remember, and we were told by Zach Goldsmith that geoengineering was moronic. Do you remember that?
Oh yes.
In the middle of this audit committee meeting, he sat up and said, "Geoengineering is moronic," and the chairwoman actually of the meeting said that's out of order. But would you like to respond? And I felt very shy in your presence, Peter. So I let you respond. Is that we were campaigning, even in 2012, for action to cool the Arctic and preserve the sea ice and preserve the Greenland ice sheet and stop the methane coming out of permafrost. We've been campaigning now for 14 years, and this is all coming home to roost because we now got ample evidence that what we were saying was liable to happen is actually happening, and there's no substitute now for applying cooling technology.
John, please let me be clear here. I'm not saying any of that is untrue. I'm saying that if we had focused on the problem 50 years ago, none of this business of climate change would be accelerating the way it is. The focus on climate has been misdirected in the sense that it is distracted from focusing on reducing consumption and the population of this planet. And by consumption,
but at this moment, What we've got to do is to focus on the cooling.
Let me finish, John.
Absolutely focus on the cooling.
Nobody's going to pay attention to you for all the reasons I spoke of before. We've been doing this. I've been at this game 60 friggin' years. And it's gotten steadily worse through that entire period on every issue we've been discussing, including the issues you're now raising about cooling the Arctic. Nobody's going to pay. It's too late anyway. But our civilization does not pay attention to objective knowledge. It subscribes to its narrative. And the current narrative is one of perpetual growth engineered by human technological prowess. That is the story we are following. And we will not abstain from that story until we're sinking like the Titanic. Look, there were people on the decks of the Titanic holding up the brochure of the, whatever it was, the North Star Line, saying, no, I'm not going to get into the lifeboat. This ship is unsinkable. It says so right here. People believe their stories. The objective evidence is of no consequence to anyone except the scientists, unfortunately, which is why we've seen, as I say, for 34 years of the Framework Convention on Climate Change, everything getting steadily, acceleratingly worse because we're doing things to make it so in the idea of solving the problem. Sorry, I'm done.
To make things worse, you've got a loony controlling the world.
That's right. A bunch of them, actually.
Opposed to climate change because it might reduce the profits of his who are
can't do that.
Play. So it's a kind of hopeless task, really.
It is.
Well, I'd like to make a call for hope. Because, I think William has given a great exposition of the problem and of one possible solution, which is to use objective science to reduce the human footprint. Now, of course, that's not politically acceptable in terms of our democratic system.
That's part of the story.
Yeah, so I agree with John that if we focus initially on cooling the Earth, then there is the potential to create a stabilization that can enable human civilization to become sustainable. Now, that's I suppose that's the big debate, and I'm interested in the potential of ocean resources to enable the current population to be sustained, and I see that as feasible. But I think that the point that you're making, Bill, about the great acceleration that so for example Will Stephan's work just showing how drastically industrial civilization has just taken off from the planet is it's really vital information, and so this point that you're making about the separation between ecology and economy is really so crucial. But then the question is there any path that can reconcile ecology and economy without a collapse of our industrial civilization? Or, like as Eliot argues, do we need to collapse the civilization and allow the planet to start again? Now, that seems to be a logical argument, but it's one it causes such great suffering for humanity, and I suppose such destruction of the value of that humanity has brought, that if we can find a way to avoid collapse, then we really should try to work that out.
One comment?
I think Rose maybe next.
Okay. Well, as someone who has children and a grandchild, I'd like to come down on the side of hope in this discussion. And so I think we need, and I'm encouraged by the work that's being done by scientists who are trying to mitigate carbon emissions or reduce them or buy time, as it's put. But I agree. I agree entirely with William that the problem is the industrialization and the endless emphasis on growth that economists advocate, and that's what that needs to change now. In order to try to turn things around, what are the possibilities of carbon or energy rationing amongst the populations? It was something that was introduced in democratic countries during World War II, so that if a couple or an individual has a limited carbon, I guess, allocation, or rather a limited energy allocation, they're much more inclined to save that energy for cooking and the essentials of day-to-day living, and might bypass endless playing of violent video games. I mean, there's an awful lot of energy that's wasted that just contributes to our other kinds of crises, holy crises, as it's put in the world today. So is carbon ration, or rather energy rationing, a possible solution?
I think if you want
Bill, I want to know if Bill thinks that's the case, or if we're just done for. There's no way to turn the economy around.
Well, look, nobody can predict the future. But if you look at the history of complex civilizations, every one of them has gone through a similar cycle of growth to maturity, to a high level of corruption and inequality, followed by a descent, which can either be rapid or slow. These have all been regional in the historic past over the last 6,000 years, but today we have a global culture. And I think a thing that people really forget is the extent to which this society, our global, what I call techno-industrial society, is fossil fuel dependent. I made the point earlier that nothing happened until 1810 or thereabouts, when Britain really started using coal and soon petroleum thereafter. That's when this huge growth spurt started. Fossil fuel is the means by which we've produced all the food and other resources necessary to sustain a population, or at least to grow a population of 8 billion people. And the fact that the Strait of Hormuz has cut off a mere 20% of global energy supplies has thrown the world into a state of panic. And many countries are now suffering from dire fuel shortages that are leading to water shortages, and we're going to see a failure of crops. This is going to be a miserable year for all the reasons that Elliot talked about earlier, on top of which are going to be the calamities induced by the failure of the world energy system, along with the various products produced by fossil fuel or from fossil fuels, from fertilizers to chips and so on. If we were to quote unquote stop fossil fuels right now, the global system would collapse and billions would starve, no question.
Well, so that might happen. But on the other hand, are you not encouraged at all by the stats that indicate that sales of EVs, for example, have gone up 70% since the Strait of Hormuz has been closed? I'm not saying that the transition to a sustainable economy isn't going to be messy and tragic for many people, but is it possible that it'll happen at all, or do we just sit and wait until the Titanic sinks?
Human beings depend on the maintenance of global life support functions of the ecosphere. And there are many studies now suggesting that the maximum sustainable population of planet Earth at a reasonable material standard is somewhere between 1 and 2 billion people. So EVs, a world of 3 billion EVs is no better than a world of 3 billion internal combustion engines, because of all the additional mining and refining and manufacturing that has to go on to maintain an EV. A very large EV, which is where the market's going, produces as much carbon dioxide in just manufacturing the battery as driving a standard internal combustion engine vehicle for 15 to 17 years, which is roughly the life expectancy of the vehicle. So EVs are no solution.
I don't think any of us are disagreeing with anything you say, William. The point is, we're in a situation now where we have to do something to prevent things collapsing.
We won't do it, John. That's my point.
Okay. Well, I'm full of hope that we can do it, and because we've got to, and we've got to persuade some key people that that's what we've got to do, and then we've got to persuade the population that they're going to be toast unless this is done. The majority of the mega cities around the world are terribly prone to a combination of sea level rise and flooding from torrential rain.
I agree, John.
So we've got to do something, and so we've got to persuade the powers that be, the people who can influence and actually do things. There's something very simple that can be done.
Let's talk to Trump and Putin and Xi.
Okay, so the United States is out of it.
Well, so is Russia, so is China, so is Japan, so is the UK.
China's supposed to be doing quite well.
No, it is not.
China, let me just say that China has been much more focused on the well-being of their citizens than other people have been in the COP process. They really want to protect their citizens, and if they knew that the only way to protect their citizens from flooding and famine and so on, they would do it. The leadership is of believing in science. They're not rubbishing science like Trump is doing. I mean, it's possible that there was this change of administration, and the US will come to its senses in a few years' time. But at the present time, the countries who really are potentially able to see that this cooling is essential are countries like India that's suffering from heat, but also water shortage and occasional terrible flooding, and Canada, because they can see the effect of the Arctic meltdown on their infrastructure, and the pipes are collapsing and the erosion and things. And then the Arctic nations, and particularly now Iceland, who are expressing fear about the AMOC collapse. So there are huge numbers of countries whose leadership, if they understood the situation as Peter and I do, through our knowledge of science and doing the calculations of what's going on with the radiative forcing and so on, if they listen to us, they can do this.
Yeah, I think the context of this poly crisis is really what William and Elliot have been emphasising, and so the question is the poly crisis so severe that there is no basis for hope for industrial civilization? Like, is there any possibility of a theory of change that can transform our world in order to a sustainable path? And that so Bill's and Elliot have essentially said no, there's not. That the scale, the momentum of the economy and the scale of delusion, I suppose, are so extreme that that the idea of changing that part, like that, we're full steam ahead to the iceberg, and there's no possibility of changing course, or that we can rearrange the deck chairs, I suppose, and like EVs are an example of rearranging the deck chairs, and yet I would say that underlying a lot of that religious delusion, there is an enlightenment. There is a recognition of truth that can, I suppose. So, for example, the biblical line, "The truth will set you free," that doesn't mean the truth that we invent. It means the truth that we discover. And so then the challenge is that does that sort of heritage of, the idea that it's possible to save the world, and that's obviously Meta's theme, Project Save the World, and the original line of saving the world is straight from the Bible. That Jesus came to earth to save the world, but then that whole message was just totally corrupted by the delusional nature of human society. So my feeling is that the sort of radical atheism that Eliot is presenting is something that is essential to engage with the facts. Anyway, look, those are a few sort of slightly rambling responses, but such a important conversation. So thank you.
This is to you, John. Because I'm so thankful that Bill Rees said the things he did, and thank you for saying those. And being a numbers data guy myself, I pay really close attention to these predictions, to the AMOC, to the tipping points, to the Arctic going ice free, and to the sea level rise, and all these different things. And what I would say is that 2100 is a really, really long way off right now. Things are changing so quickly. If the AMOC collapses sooner rather than later, that's going to really change the trajectory of a lot of those other variables that you mentioned. Also, the whole idea of 4C is something that's very much a hot debate item between sort of the Michael Mann camp versus the James Hansen camp. There are so much debate about everything that I hesitate, and I love these long-term projections. I hesitate to go beyond 2040, honestly. And people twist my arm and I go to 2050, and we just don't know. I mean, my best estimate is 2C by the mid-late 2030s right now, based on the current warming. Beyond that, I mean, who knows what's going to happen to civilization in the next 15, 20, 25 years. And that's going to have a huge impact on all those other predictions, plus all the other feedbacks that may or may not happen, on some sort of schedule. So I just wanted to sort of add my word of caution about these long-term numbers, that they're sort of very much against my way of thinking about how precipitous, how much on a tipping point of pretty much everything we are right now.
The Mann versus Hansen camp, where would you fall?
I am an old school academic. I really like my PhDs, and I was a professor of mathematics. I was an advisor for the pre-meteorology program, and all of my students wanted to go to Penn. They wanted to go to where that was their school, right? That was the #1 school in the country. So it's really hard for me to argue against a lower ECS, a lower warming level that they predicted. But if you actually look at the entire range, right, the error bar, they're not outside of each other's error bars, either. So it seems like we're somewhere between about 2.7 and 4.5. And I want to be friends with both of them.
Okay, fair enough.
I just don't know.
Peter, dear.
Our lunacy in in what we could do but are not doing. And in fact, William especially made this point about cars, and I noticed this today from walking around the streets of my town, that what used to be small cars, in English type cars, now they're gigantic, bloated things, and for no reason. There's no reason why you should have a gigantic bloated car that takes 2 parking bays up. When all you've done is just added a whole mass of pointless ironmongery to the road, and yet people do that, and all my neighbours are now getting gigantic cars. Another thing, which is a lesson, I suppose, is the fact that I was watching a public broadcasting show today, and dealing with the loss of. This was concerned with why did the world lose the wonderful product of civilization that ended suddenly, and people wondered why on earth did it come to an end when it had every prospect of being ruling the world. That Hannibal and his elephants. Romans were sort of legitimately assumed to have taken over the world because we were better at fighting and so on, we being the Romans. But in fact, it turns out that the reason why every things went pear-shaped in the Mediterranean was the dodgy way that civilization acted in its own supposedly in its own interests, which was they'd pretty well taken over the whole Mediterranean region because of their ability and skill. But in the end, it was because they vanished within about 100 years, and it was all because there was battles between the groups who were trying to keep things going, and the people who were actually doing the work of keeping the world of that going, with energy, and it failed. It all failed in a terrible mess. Feeling when you look at a civilization and its end, you feel bad about the whole system.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to find this word eventually, and then I'm going to go back and splice in the word so everybody will know what we've been trying to find out. Okay? All right. Thanks. I know I want to say hello, if you don't mind, unless you have something more you want to say. I want to say hello to Arzu, who's joining us, I believe, from Azerbaijan.
I'm from Azerbaijan, and you know that Azerbaijan is located between Iran, Russia, and so our neighbors, Russia in war with Ukraine, Iran under the bombing and bomb itself. So it is really very, how to say, even not hard. It is in certain situation, absolutely. So we don't know what to expect next, and our opportunities is not too much. We try to speak loudly, but I don't understand what the willing of Trump. We don't know that today he wants Greenland, another time Canada, another time would like to destroy NATO, or I really don't know what this person wants and who behind of him, and how long this process will be to destroying the order that and the order of UN. UN is absolutely suffered now, and could do nothing in such situation. Or we have to think about another structure, another international structure, transforming UN, but it is not possible to do without, how to say, we should not destroy anything, not creating new one. It's for sure.
You still have the residual organization left from the Helsinki Citizens Assembly, where
Yes.
you and I met, and of course it was led mostly in those days by Mary Kaldor and Sonja Licht. But you're the only remaining area that still calls itself the Helsinki Citizens Assembly, and you have members throughout the South Caucasus. Is that right?
Yes.
We had a conversation about Armenia and some changes that are going on there. Now, of course, Azerbaijan has been in a long conflict with Armenia. Can you, in a couple of sentences, tell us what you are doing about that issue and how things look on that front now?
Here I am a chairwoman of Helsinki Citizens Assembly in Azerbaijan, and we have partner in Armenia, in Georgia. All three countries are is in South Caucasus. Is our region is calling South Caucasus. Azerbaijan and Armenia is involved to the war, engaged to the war more than 30 since 1988. Armenia deported Azerbaijan population from their home places, occupied 20%. And Azerbaijan, after more than 30 years, attempt to release their land, and applied for Armenian of Nagorno Karabakh for integration to Azerbaijan society, and they refuse it.
There's been some change, I believe, in Armenia, that Armenia has taken a new position,
Absolutely, yes.
toward a more Western position, turning away from Russian influence now.
It's the Armenia now more democratic country, more trying to be more free, free from Russia, and change the dependence from Russia. It's still economical dependent from Russia, but it changes every day. Now Armenia took the support from European countries. Maybe you know that 2 days ago it was a European countries summit in Armenia. It was essential, and for Pachinian and for us, we think that it is very essential for peace process, because two countries now are in the peace process, in ongoing peace. We looking for signing the peace agreement. Sure, we are very happy. We are very happy
That's all.
we're very happy that Pashinyan still have power, but they expect the very soon the elections. We hope that Pashinyan will win.
Project Save the World has a new activity, which we do 5 of these every year. 5 different inquiries about, or an inquiry about 5 different topics: war and weapons, global warming, AI and cyber risks, the global economic situation, and global governance, which we think will be about creating mostly a better United Nations, workable, solving some of the UN problems, and so on. So, and each of these inquiries is open to our members and to certain other people who may want to join us, but they would need to become members of Project Save the World to join us. And each one goes on for 5 weeks. And you have to register to be a member in this activity. But if you register, you almost certainly will be welcomed. And every week on Wednesday it's 4:00 in Toronto time. It'll be we chose that time because it's the best hour for people around the world. It's not good for people in India, but most other countries can meet us for what is 4:00 daylight savings time in Eastern zone. And we will meet for 1 hour, and the agenda will be stipulated in advance, and I'll send it for everybody who registers. I'll send out the curriculum, so to speak. And that is, you're supposed to do a little homework before each meeting, read articles that we assign, and watch a video or so, but it won't be more than 1 or 2 hours a week of work. But you do that before the meeting. We get together and we talk for 4 consecutive Wednesdays. And on the 5th meeting, we record that and edit it and post it, because the 5th meeting consists of an effort to put together a set of recommendations based on the agenda that we started with. All 4 of the sessions that we've been deliberating together. So it's a conversation like the one we've been going through here, but each week will be on a particular topic that's specified in advance. And the final product is going to be a document, a recommendation that could be used, if you like, for lobbying or any other activity that you find useful. So I want to encourage everybody to join in this 5-week series, and bring your friends or get your friends to register. You do need to register, and you do need to promise to try to do the whole thing. If you miss a week, then you can watch the video for that week, and that video will only be available to people who are registered, and who, anybody who's registered can watch it, but it's mainly a way to keep the people who missed a session from actually losing track of what what we talked about, or their place in it. So if you have a question now, Jill will be doing the next one, which it's going to be on preventing war. This session for the war and the war inquiry for this year, the focus will be on what can be done to prevent wars, and evaluate various proposals that have been put forward for preventing wars. And Jill will be doing most of the chairing. I hope some of you will be interested in this 5-week project. Anybody?
Well, I'm going to try, Meta, but Not sure I can, I know I can't make the first meeting.
Uh-huh. All right. Okay, well, thank you. Any of you are certainly welcome. The way to
Possibly.
join is you go to our website, which is tosavetheworld.ca. That's our Project Save the World's website. And when you get in there, there'll be a pop-up window. And if you click there, you will be taken to a place which will explain a little bit more about it, and then where you can register. So thank you all.
Thanks very much, Meta. Bye-bye.
Okay, goodbye, friends.